She swore never to surrender herself to a man who wanted to destroy her. But she married a millionaire who collected virgin brides and secrets. On their wedding night, he whispered, "If you beg, I'll stop. If you love stories of love and romance, watch until the end. You won't regret it." Subscribe to this channel and comment where you're listening to this beautiful story from. Let's continue. If this story has piqued your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Lucy Eleanor Fitzgerald's life had always been too quiet for the 21st century. Raised by her grandmother, Grace, on a manor lost among the hills of Yorkshire, where time seemed to have stopped at some point in the last century, she learned from childhood that love was more dangerous than solitude. Jerome Manor, with its pink sandstone walls and courtyards filled with withered wisteria, was a monument to renunciation. 3 generations of Fitzgerald women had lived there, all marked by the same promise that now weighed on Lucy Eleanor's shoulders like an inherited cross. Her grandmother's diary, kept under 7 locks in a cedar chest wrapped in black mourning ribbons, was the greatest symbol of that ancestral promise. Lucy Eleanor had seen it only once when she was 12, and her grandmother sat her in front of the fireplace to tell her what it meant to be a Fitzgerald woman. The pages, yellowed by tears and time, contained words that were etched into her memory like a branding iron. "Purity is not a virtue, it is armor," Grace had written in a trembling hand. "Never surrender your body without first knowing the abyss of the other, because the Montgomery men always return, and when they find the strongest, they try to break her." Lucy Eleanor didn't understand what all that meant then. The Montgomerys were just a name her grandmother pronounced with a strange mixture of hatred and nostalgia. A powerful family, owners of a hotel empire that stretched from London to the beaches of Brighton, with roots that delved deep into the era of the Victorian reforms and the Edwardian period. But what did they have to do with the women of Jerome Manor? Her grandmother never fully explained it. She only repeated every night before bed that Lucy Eleanor should be prepared, that someday one of them would come, as had always happened, generation after generation. At 27, Lucy Eleanor was still waiting without knowing for what. She lived within the walls of the manor like a relic of the past, tending to the few guests who arrived seeking tranquility or an escape from the modern world. The manor now functioned as a small country inn. Grace's last attempt to keep the property alive before old age forced her to hand over control to her granddaughter. Lucy Eleanor cooked, cleaned, arranged the rooms with white linen sheets and vases with fresh garden flowers. Her life was a predictable, almost monastic routine, and she had come to believe that it would be so forever, until he arrived. It was a Tuesday in October when the black car stopped in front of Jerome Manor's main entrance. Lucy Eleanor was in the courtyard, hanging clothes under the warm morning sun, when she heard the engine. They weren't expecting guests that day. She dried her hands on her apron and walked towards the entrance, barefoot as she usually was when working at home. The man who got out of the vehicle was tall, dressed in a dark suit that seemed out of place in that rural setting. He had black hair combed back, a sharp jawline, and eyes that looked at her with an intensity that stole her breath. Eyes of a winter grey, sharp as a razor's edge. "Good morning," he said in a deep voice. "I'm looking for Miss Lucy Eleanor Fitzgerald." She felt a shiver run down her spine. No one called her Miss. In the village, she was known simply as Mrs. Grace's granddaughter, the manor girl who never went to parties or had suitors. "That's me," she replied cautiously, without getting too close. "How can I help you?" The man observed her in silence for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. There was something in his gaze that made her feel naked, as if he could see through the worn fabric of her cotton dress, through her skin, down to the secrets she kept deep within her being. "My name is Adrian Montgomery," he finally said, "and I've come to make you a proposal." The surname fell upon her like ice water. Montgomery, the name her grandmother pronounced with that mixture of hatred and nostalgia, the name that appeared in the pages of the forbidden diary. Lucy Eleanor instinctively took a step back, but Adrian raised a hand in a gesture meant to be reassuring. "Don't be alarmed," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I haven't come to harm you, quite the opposite. I've come to offer you a way out of this place." "A way out?" Lucy Eleanor repeated, confused. "I don't understand." Adrian gestured broadly towards the manor. "This place is falling apart, Miss Fitzgerald. Debts are accumulating, taxes are overdue. Your grandmother is ill and you work day and night to keep this running, but we both know it's a losing battle. In 6 months, maybe a year, you'll have to sell, and when you do, I'll be here to buy. But I offer you something better, something that will benefit both of us." Lucy Eleanor felt rage beginning to replace fear. "How dare you come here and talk about my problems as if you know them? Who gave you permission to investigate my life?" "The Montgomerys have always been connected to the Fitzgeralds," Adrian replied calmly. "Our families have a history that dates back over 150 years, and I have a need that only you can satisfy." The words sounded so laden with meaning that Lucy Eleanor felt the air grow dense around her. "What kind of need?" she asked, though a part of her didn't want to know the answer. Adrian took a step towards her. "I need a wife," he said with brutal frankness. "Not for love, not for passion, for obligation. My grandfather's inheritance clause requires me to marry before I turn 35, or I will lose the entire empire my family built over generations. And not just any woman, someone who meets certain requirements." Lucy Eleanor looked at him in disbelief. "And you think I meet those requirements?" "Why? Because I'm poor? Because I'm convenient? Because you're a Fitzgerald?" he replied. "Because you carry in your blood the same mark that makes this possible. Because though you may not know it, you and I were destined for this before we were born." "You're crazy," Lucy Eleanor murmured, backing away towards the house. "Leave. I don't want to know anything about your inheritance or your obligations." But Adrian didn't move. He just looked at her with that unsettling intensity, as if he could see something in her that she herself didn't even know. "I'm not crazy," he said softly, "and you know it. You've felt that something was missing in your life, haven't you? You've felt that this place, this existence, is nothing more than a wait, a preparation for something that has yet to arrive. Well, Miss Fitzgerald, I am that something. And you can reject me now. You can close the door in my face. But I will return. Because this is bigger than you and me. It's a cycle that repeats generation after generation. And we are next." Lucy Eleanor felt her legs tremble, not from fear, but from something far more disturbing. Recognition, as if Adrian's words resonated with an ancient truth that had been dormant within her. She forced herself to maintain composure, not to show the confusion that overwhelmed her. "I'll give you 3 days to think about it," Adrian continued, pulling a card from his jacket pocket and placing it on the stone wall that separated the garden from the path. 3 days to decide if you want to stay here, watching everything slowly crumble, or if you're willing to take a leap into the unknown. The choice is yours." He turned and walked back to his car with sure steps. Before getting in, he turned one last time. "By the way," he said, "your grandmother knew I was coming. Ask her about the pact. Ask her what she promised when she was your age." The car started, raising a cloud of reddish dust that took several minutes to dissipate. Lucy Eleanor stood in the same spot, her heart beating so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She took the card with trembling hands. On it, in embossed gold letters, was Adrian Montgomery's name and a phone number. Nothing else. That night, Lucy Eleanor couldn't sleep. Adrian's words swirled in her head like a whirlwind. The pact. Her grandmother knew. She waited until the clock struck 3 in the morning, the hour when Grace usually rose for her nightly prayers, and crept down to her grandmother's room. She found her awake, sitting in her rocking chair by the window, looking at the full moon that illuminated the courtyard with a silver light. "He came, didn't he?" Grace asked without turning. Her voice sounded tired, as if she had been waiting for that question for years. "Yes," Lucy Eleanor replied. "A man named Adrian Montgomery. He says he knows our history, that there's a pact." Grace closed her eyes and sighed deeply. "They always come, my dear. It's our destiny. The Montgomerys and the Fitzgeralds, bound by something that began so long ago that no one remembers how it started anymore. We only know that it repeats. Every generation, one of them comes for one of us. And every generation we must decide. Decide what, grandmother? Whether we will be strong enough to break the cycle, or if we will let ourselves be consumed by it." Lucy Eleanor felt a knot in her throat. "Did you decide?" Grace opened her eyes and finally looked at her granddaughter. In her eyes was a sadness so profound it seemed bottomless. "I tried to break it, my dear. And look at me now, alone in this house that is falling apart, waiting for my end. I broke nothing. I only broke myself." Tears began to roll down Lucy Eleanor's cheeks. "I don't want your life, grandmother. I don't want to end up like this." "Then perhaps you should go with him," Grace whispered. "Perhaps you are stronger than I am. Perhaps you can do what I could not. But be careful, my dear, the Montgomerys don't seek wives, they seek mirrors, and when they find one that doesn't break easily, they do everything they can to shatter it." The 3 days passed like a sigh. Lucy Eleanor tried to continue her routine, but every task felt empty, every moment charged with an anticipation that consumed her from within. She secretly checked her grandmother's diary, finding pages and pages of hurried handwriting that spoke of a forbidden love, of broken promises, of a man who had arrived at the manor when Grace was 27. The same man who had left her when she refused to fulfill what he expected. The same man who later married another and founded an empire, while Grace remained at Jerome Manor, waiting for something that never returned. On the 3rd day, as the sun began to set behind the hills, Lucy Eleanor dialed the number on the card. Adrian answered on the first ring. "I accept," she said without preamble, "but on one condition. I want to know the whole truth. I want to know what this cycle is and why us." There was a silence on the other end of the line, then a low, humorless laugh. "The truth, Miss Fitzgerald, is something that reveals itself little by little, like love, like hatred. Come with me, and you will discover it. Tomorrow at 10 in the morning I will pick you up. Bring only what is necessary. I will provide the rest. And my grandmother, your grandmother, will be fine. I will make sure she has everything she needs. It's part of the deal." When she hung up, Lucy Eleanor felt she had crossed an invisible line. There was no turning back. The morning came too quickly. Lucy Eleanor had barely slept, spending the dark hours packing a small suitcase with her few valuable belongings, simple clothes, a few photographs of her mother whom she barely remembered, and a medal of Our Lady of Lourdes that had belonged to her great-grandmother. As she folded each garment, she felt Grace's gaze upon her, though her grandmother had not left her room since their early morning conversation. When the black car appeared promptly at 10, Lucy Eleanor was already waiting on the porch with her suitcase at her feet. Adrian got out of the vehicle, but this time he was not alone. He was accompanied by an older man with completely white hair and an impeccable suit, who looked at her with an inscrutable expression. Mr. Stephen Thorne, the man introduced himself with a slight bow of his head. "Attorney for the Montgomery family for 40 years. I have the marriage agreement documents." "Marriage agreement?" Lucy Eleanor repeated, feeling the reality of the situation hit her with renewed force. "Aren't we going to get to know each other first? To go out? To—" "There's no time for that," Adrian interrupted in a firm voice. "The ceremony will take place tomorrow. Today we will sign the contract and you will see your new home. If after seeing what awaits you, you decide to back out, I will bring you back. But you must decide today." Lucy Eleanor looked towards the manor, towards the windows, where she knew her grandmother was watching her from behind the lace curtains. For a moment her whole being screamed at her to run back to the safety of the known, but something stronger, something that came from deep within, told her to move forward. "All right," she finally said, "let's see those documents." The journey to London lasted 4 hours. Mr. Thorne drove while Adrian and Lucy Eleanor remained silent in the back seat, separated by an invisible chasm. She looked out the window, watching the landscape of hills and fields gradually transform into the urban immensity of the capital. Adrian watched her from the corner of his eye, studying her as if she were an enigma he needed to solve. When they finally arrived at their destination, Lucy Eleanor held her breath. It was not a hotel or a modern building as she had imagined. It was a 3-story colonial mansion in the heart of Hampstead, surrounded by high walls covered with ivy and with a wrought-iron gate that opened automatically upon their arrival. The front garden was filled with flowering magnolia trees, creating a purple carpet over the stone path that led to the main entrance. "Welcome to Montgomery House," Adrian said, as he helped her out of the car. "This has been my family's residence since 1870. I was born here, I grew up here, and here we will spend our days as husband and wife." The word husband and wife sounded strange on his lips, almost artificial. Lucy Eleanor followed Adrian and Mr. Thorne inside the mansion, where she was greeted by a towering foyer decorated with frescoes depicting scenes of ancient myths and legends. There was a marble staircase that split in 2 on the 2nd floor, and on both sides dark wooden doors that led to rooms Lucy Eleanor could only imagine. Mr. Thorne guided them to a study on the ground floor, where a multi-page document rested on a mahogany desk. "Please sit, Miss Fitzgerald," the lawyer indicated, We must review the marriage clauses before proceeding. Lucy Eleanor sat in a leather chair and took the document with trembling hands. As she read, she felt disbelief mingle with a growing sense of unreality. The contract stipulated that she would become Adrian Montgomery's legal wife, with all the rights and obligations that implied. She would have access to the family's bank accounts, receive a generous monthly allowance, and in case of separation, she was guaranteed substantial financial compensation. Everything seemed reasonable until she reached page 3. Article 7, she read aloud, feeling her voice tremble. The wife undertakes not to access the third floor of the residence under any circumstances. Article 8. The wife undertakes not to mention or investigate Miss Valerie Sterling. Article 9. The wife undertakes not to open or read the diary located in the main library after midnight. She looked up at Adrian, who was watching her with an inscrutable expression. What kind of agreement is this? What's on the third floor? Who is Valerie Sterling? And why can't I read a diary? These are necessary conditions, Adrian replied in a tense voice. If you accept them, we will proceed. If not, I can take you back to Yorkshire right now. Lucy Eleanor felt a mix of rage and fascination. Each clause was like a red flag, a warning that she was about to enter dangerous territory. But at the same time they were a challenge, an invitation to discover the secrets hidden behind each prohibition. What if I accept but break one of these rules? She asked with a courage she didn't know she possessed. Adrian leaned forward, bringing his face close to hers. His grey eyes pierced her with an intensity that stole her breath. Then you will discover things you might prefer not to know, he whispered, and I will have to make decisions I would prefer not to make. Mr. Thorne cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mr. Montgomery, perhaps we should give the young lady more time to consider. No, Lucy Eleanor interrupted, picking up the pen that rested next to the document. I will sign. But know this, Mr. Montgomery, I am not the kind of woman who follows rules without questioning them. If there are secrets in this house, I will discover them, and if there are closed doors, I will find a way to open them. A barely perceptible smile appeared on Adrian's lips. I hope so, Miss Fitzgerald. I hope so. The ceremony took place the next day in a private chapel within the property. There was no family, no party, no flowers beyond the white roses that decorated the altar. Only Mr. Thorne as a witness, the priest who officiated the mass, and the two protagonists of that strange marriage were present. Lucy Eleanor wore a simple white lace dress that Mr. Thorne had arranged to be brought that morning, and Adrian a black suit that made him look even more somber than usual. When the priest asked them to exchange vows, Lucy Eleanor felt a knot in her throat. The traditional words sounded empty in that silent chapel, as if they were an echo of something that had happened many times before. Adrian looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher, a mixture of determination and something that dangerously resembled fear. You may kiss the bride, the priest finally announced. Adrian approached slowly, but instead of kissing her on the lips, he barely brushed her cheek with his own in a gesture that was more a formality than a show of affection. Lucy Eleanor felt the scent of his cologne, something citrusy mixed with cedar, and the warmth of his breath near her ear. Welcome to the Montgomery family, he whispered so low that only she could hear him. May God help us both. The wedding night was strange from the beginning. Mr. Thorne retired after the ceremony, leaving them alone in that enormous mansion that seemed to watch them from every corner. Adrian guided Lucy Eleanor to the second floor, where he showed her what would be her room. They would not share a room, he explained in a neutral voice. At least not for now. She needed time to adapt, and he needed space to think. Lucy Eleanor entered the room and stood motionless. It was 3 times larger than her room at the manor, with a canopy bed covered in ivory silk sheets, an antique dressing table with an oval mirror, and windows that overlooked an inner courtyard filled with fountains and sculptures. But what caught her attention was the portrait hanging over the fireplace. A woman of stunning beauty, with black hair pulled back in a high bun and dressed in a burgundy Victorian gown, looked at her from the canvas with eyes that seemed to follow her. Who is it? Lucy Eleanor asked, unable to tear her gaze from the portrait. Adrian approached and observed the painting with a somber expression. My great-grandmother, Madeline Montgomery née Fitzgerald. She died in this house over 100 years ago. They say she was never happy in her marriage, that she was always waiting for something that never came. Fitzgerald, Lucy Eleanor repeated, feeling a chill. Like my surname? Like your surname, Adrian confirmed. I told you our families are connected. This is just the beginning of what you will discover if you choose to stay. He turned to leave, but Lucy Eleanor stopped him with a question. Why me, Adrian? Of all the women in the world, why come for me? He stopped in the doorway without turning. Because you are the only one who can bear it, he replied. The only one who has the necessary strength. The others broke before they got this far. The others? Lucy Eleanor whispered, but Adrian had already closed the door, leaving her alone with the portrait and her thoughts. 2 hours passed before he returned. Lucy Eleanor had changed into a cotton nightgown she found in the wardrobe, wondering if it had been left there specifically for her, or if it had belonged to someone else. She was standing by the window, looking at the full moon that illuminated the courtyard, when she heard the door slowly open. Adrian entered barefoot, dressed only in dark trousers and an unbuttoned white shirt. There was something different in his gaze, something darker and more primitive, that made her instinctively back towards the wall. He advanced towards her with slow, deliberate steps, like a predator stalking its prey. I've been thinking, he said in a husky voice, about what you said yesterday, that you're not the kind of woman who follows rules without questioning them. I like that. I like your courage. But I need you to understand something, Lucy Eleanor. In this house, in this marriage, there are limits, and if you choose to cross them, there will be consequences. He stopped inches from her, so close that Lucy Eleanor could feel the warmth emanating from his body. His hand slowly rose and caressed her cheek with a softness that contrasted with the intensity of his gaze. Are you afraid? He asked in a whisper. He asked. No, Lucy Eleanor lied, though her heart was beating so loudly she was sure he could hear it. You should be, Adrian murmured, leaning towards her until his lips almost brushed hers. Because I am afraid. Afraid of what you might make me feel. Afraid of what I might do to you if you let me. And then when Lucy Eleanor expected the kiss, when her body tensed in anticipation, Adrian uttered the words that would change everything. If you ask me to stop, I will stop. But if you beg me, then I will know you are ready to know the truth. Lucy Eleanor felt something break inside her. It wasn't desire, it wasn't fear, it was rage. An ancient rage that came from all the Fitzgerald women who had been in that same position, waiting for a Montgomery man to decide their fate. I will not beg, she said in a firm voice, looking him directly in the eyes. I am not like the others, and if you want to discover who I really am, you will have to earn it. For the first time since she met him, she saw something akin to surprise cross Adrian's face. Then, slowly, a genuine smile appeared on his lips, a smile that completely transformed his expression, making him look younger and more vulnerable. You are different, he murmured, stepping back. The others begged. Some for me to continue, others for me to stop. But none looked at me as you look at me now, as if you weren't afraid of me but had compassion. And with that word, compassion, something changed in the room. Adrian turned and walked towards the door, but before leaving he stopped. Tomorrow you will begin to discover the secrets of this house, he said without looking at her. And when you do, you will understand why I needed a wife like you. Because only someone with your strength can help me break this cycle, or condemn me to repeat it forever. The first days at Montgomery House passed in a strange haze. Lucy Eleanor woke up each morning in that luxurious room, looking at the portrait of Madeleine Montgomery née Fitzgerald, and wondering if all of it was real, or simply a dream from which she would soon awaken. Adrian had disappeared the day after the wedding, leaving her a brief note saying he had business matters to attend to in Brighton and would return in a week. The house was left in the care of an older woman named Doris, who had been the family's housekeeper for 30 years, and who looked at Lucy Eleanor with a mixture of curiosity and pity. The mistress must be tired from the journey, Doris said on the first day as she served breakfast in the main dining room. If you need anything, just call me. The house is large and can be confusing at first. There are rooms that haven't been opened in years. Why are they closed? Lucy Eleanor asked, feeling her curious instinct awaken. Doris lowered her gaze, uncomfortable. It's not my place to speak of that, madam. Mr. Adrian will explain when he returns. For now I recommend you familiarize yourself with the main areas. The garden is beautiful this time of year, and the library has thousands of books if you like to read. The library. Lucy Eleanor remembered one of the contract clauses. Do not open or read the diary located in the main library after midnight, which meant there was a diary there, and that Adrian didn't want her to read it. Or perhaps she thought with an ironic smile, he did want her to read it, and that's why he had put that clause, like an invitation disguised as a prohibition. That afternoon, while Doris was busy cleaning another wing of the mansion, Lucy Eleanor decided to explore. She started on the first floor, walking through drawing rooms decorated with antique furniture, paintings of unknown ancestors, and display cases filled with objects that seemed to belong to different eras. There was a music room with a grand piano covered by a white sheet, a formal dining room that could seat 20 people, and a living room with enormous windows overlooking the back garden. But what really caught her attention was the portrait gallery in the hallway connecting the dining room to the library. There, hung on the burgundy walls, were the faces of 6 generations of Montgomerys, men with severe gazes, women of cold beauty, children who looked like small adults in their formal attire. Lucy Eleanor walked slowly, studying each face until she stopped in front of one that made her hold her breath. It was a young woman, no more than 25, dressed in an early 20th century gown. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun, and she wore a pearl necklace that rested on her long, elegant neck. But what made Lucy Eleanor feel the floor move beneath her feet was the woman's face. It was identical to hers. The same dark eyes, the same straight nose, the same full lips, and there, visible even in the oil painting, was the white streak in her hair that Lucy Eleanor had inherited from her grandmother and had always considered a genetic rarity. Her hands trembled as she searched for the plaque identifying the portrait. Mercy Fitzgerald née Montgomery, 1912 to 1938. Wife of Octavian Montgomery. Fitzgerald, that surname again. Another woman from her family who had ended up married to a Montgomery. Lucy Eleanor felt a sudden dizziness and had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. How many had there been? How many Fitzgerald women had crossed that same threshold, signed similar contracts, slept in rooms where portraits of their ancestors watched them from the walls? She needed answers, and she knew exactly where to look for them. The library was at the opposite end of the first floor, through carved double wooden doors that opened with an ancient groan. The interior was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves covered all 4 walls, filled with leather-bound volumes of every imaginable color. There were rolling ladders to reach the upper shelves, reading armchairs by the windows, and a central oak table where an antique globe rested. The smell of old paper and dust permeated the space, creating an atmosphere of preserved knowledge through time. Lucy Eleanor walked among the shelves, reading the spines of the books. There was everything from classics of world literature to treatises on colonial architecture, from British history books to 19th century romantic novels. But what she was looking for was not in plain sight. If there was a diary that Adrian didn't want her to read after midnight, it must be hidden somewhere not so obvious. She spent an hour searching, checking drawers, moving books, until finally, behind a complete edition of the works of Jane Austen, she found a hollow in the wall. And inside that hollow, wrapped in black velvet, was a book with worn leather covers. She took it with trembling hands and carried it to one of the armchairs by the window. It was barely 4 in the afternoon. Midnight was still hours away. Technically, she wasn't breaking any rules. She opened the diary carefully, aware that the yellowed pages might disintegrate at the slightest carelessness. The first page was dated 1935, and the calligraphy, though old, was clear and elegant. "My name is Mercy Fitzgerald, and this will be the record of my descent, not into hell, for hell would be more merciful, but into the cycle, the eternal return of a fate I believed I could change." Lucy Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. She kept reading page after page as the sun slowly moved across the sky and the shadows of the library lengthened. Mercy wrote about her arrival at Montgomery House, about a marriage contract almost identical to the one Lucy Eleanor had signed, about a cold and distant husband who looked at her as if searching for something in her that he couldn't quite find. "I have discovered something terrible," read an entry from several months later. "On the 3rd floor, where I am not supposed to enter, there is a room, and in that room there are portraits, dozens of them, all women, all with the same white streak in their hair, all Fitzgeralds, and beneath each portrait a date, an entry date and an exit date, as if we were livestock marked for sacrifice." Lucy Eleanor's hands trembled so much that she had to rest the diary on her lap. What did that mean? How many women had passed through there, And what had happened to all of them? She continued reading until she reached the last entry, dated just 3 days before the exit date that appeared on the plaque she had seen in the portrait. Octavian has finally told me the truth. The Montgomerys are cursed, or perhaps blessed, depending on how you look at it. Each generation must marry a Fitzgerald. It is part of a pact made 150 years ago, when the first Montgomery saved the first Fitzgerald's life during the Victorian reforms. The debt had to be paid with mixed blood, generation after generation. But there is something else, something Octavian doesn't dare to tell me fully, something about what happens when one of us refuses, or when she discovers the secret too soon. I am afraid, not of the cycle, but of what I might become if I stay. Tomorrow, I will try to escape. And there the diary ended. There were no more entries. Lucy Eleanor closed the book slowly, feeling her world had completely transformed. Mercy had tried to escape. And what had happened to her? The exit date on her portrait was just 4 days after that last entry. The sound of footsteps in the hallway pulled her from her thoughts. Doris appeared at the library door with a worried expression. "Madam, it's already night. Dinner is served. I've been looking for you all over the house." Lucy Eleanor looked out the window and was surprised to see that it had indeed grown dark. She had been so engrossed in reading that she hadn't noticed the passage of time. "I'll be right there," she replied, quickly hiding the diary under a cushion on the armchair. She dined alone in the large dining room, while Doris served her a rich mushroom soup and roast chicken with all the trimmings. The food was delicious, but Lucy Eleanor could barely eat a bite. Her mind revolved around everything she had discovered: the portrait identical to her, Mercy's diary, the mention of the 3rd floor where there were supposedly more portraits. "Doris," she asked, trying to sound casual, "did you know Octavian Montgomery, Adrian's grandfather?" The older woman froze, water pitcher in hand. "Yes, madam. I worked for him in the last years of his life. He was a complicated man. And his wife, Mercy." Doris's face darkened. "We don't speak of her, madam. Those are Mr. Adrian's orders." But Lucy Eleanor was not going to give up so easily. "Please, Doris, I need to know. I saw her portrait. She looks so much like me, it's like looking in a mirror. What happened to her?" Doris placed the picture on the table with trembling hands. "She left," she whispered, looking towards the door as if fearing someone would hear her. "One night, she simply left. Mr. Octavian searched everywhere for her, but they never found her. Some say she ran off with an employee, others that she threw herself into the river, but I believe she is still alive, because sometimes, when I walk through the hallways at night, I feel like there's someone else here, as if the walls hold memories." That night, Lucy Eleanor couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the old mansion: creaking wood, whispers of the wind, the ticking of an antique clock somewhere far away. And then, just as the clock struck midnight, she heard something different. Footsteps, soft footsteps coming from the hallway. She slowly got up and approached the door. She opened it just a crack and looked out. The hallway was empty, barely illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the windows. But there was something on the floor, a white envelope that definitely hadn't been there when she went to bed. Lucy Eleanor picked it up with trembling hands. It had no sender, just her name written in an old, elegant script. She opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The message was brief but terrifying. "Those who seek the truth must be willing to pay the price. The 3rd floor awaits you. But be careful. Some doors once opened cannot be closed." There was no signature. Lucy Eleanor looked both ways down the hallway, searching for any indication of who had left the envelope. But she was alone, completely alone in that enormous house full of secrets. She tucked the paper into her nightgown pocket and returned to bed, knowing that sleep would not come that night. Because now she had a decision to make: follow the rules and live in ignorance, or break them and discover what on earth was happening at Montgomery House. The morning arrived with a timid sun that barely illuminated the velvet curtains of her room. Lucy Eleanor had fallen asleep at dawn, exhausted by the hours of vigil and the thoughts swirling in her head like a whirlwind. When she finally woke up, she found a breakfast tray outside her door and a note from Doris saying that she had gone shopping and would return in the afternoon. It was the perfect opportunity. Lucy Eleanor quickly dressed in a simple cotton gown and left her room. The 2nd floor hallway stretched before her, silent and seemingly empty. At the end, Just before the corridor turned left, there was a narrower staircase leading up to the third floor, the staircase she had been forbidden to use. She approached slowly, feeling that each step was a betrayal of the contract she had signed. But at the same time, she felt she had no choice. Mercy's diary words resonated in her mind. On the third floor there is a room, and in that room there are portraits. Dozens of them. All women, all with the same white streak in their hair. The stairs creaked under her feet as she ascended. The walls were covered with old wallpaper with a faded rose design, and the air smelled of dampness and oblivion. Reaching the top landing, she found herself in a much shorter hallway than those on the lower floors. There were only 3 doors, all closed. She approached the first and turned the knob. It was open. The interior was an empty room without furniture or decoration, just dust and light filtered through broken blinds. The second door also yielded easily, revealing what appeared to have been a nursery, with an antique cradle in one corner and wooden toys covered in cobwebs. But the third door was different. It had an antique lock and the wood was painted black, contrasting with the light color of the other 2. Lucy Eleanor tried to turn the knob, but it was stuck. She searched the pockets of her dress, though she knew she had no key. And then she remembered something she had seen in her room. The antique dressing table had several small drawers, and in one of them she had found old keys that she thought were useless. She ran down to her room, took the keys from the drawer, and returned to the third floor. She tried one after another, until finally, with a satisfying click, the 4th key turned in the lock. The door slowly opened, revealing a circular room that must have occupied the entire east tower of the mansion. Lucy Eleanor entered and held her breath. The walls were completely covered with portraits, dozens of them, just as Mercy had described. Women from different eras, dressed in the fashions of their times, but all with one common feature, the white streak in their hair, and beneath each portrait, a small plaque with names, entry dates, and exit dates. She walked slowly around the room, reading the plaques. Hope Fitzgerald née Montgomery, 1872 to 1874. Consuelo Fitzgerald née Montgomery, 1895 to 1898. Grace Fitzgerald, 1952 to 1953. She stopped dead at that last name. Grace, her grandmother. But that was impossible. Her grandmother had never married a Montgomery. She had never left Jerome Manor, or so she had always been told. With trembling hands, she approached the portrait. It was her grandmother, no doubt. Much younger, with jet-black hair except for the characteristic white streak, dressed in a 1950s outfit. But the exit date was barely a year after the entry date. What had happened? Why had her grandmother never told her she had been married to a Montgomery? And then she understood. Her grandmother's words resonated in her memory. "I tried to break it, my dear. And look at me now, alone in this house that is falling apart, waiting for my end. I broke nothing. I only broke myself." Her grandmother had been here. She had been part of the cycle, and she had escaped, returning to the manor where she spent the rest of her life, hoping the cycle would not reach her again. But there was one more portrait that caught her attention. It was in a prominent place right in front of the entrance, a beautiful woman with blonde hair and light eyes, dressed in a modern outfit from just a few years ago. The plaque read, "Valerie Sterling, 2019 to 2020. Adrian Montgomery's fiancée. Fiancée, not wife." And she didn't have the white streak. She wasn't a Fitzgerald. Lucy Eleanor felt a pang of something dangerously akin to jealousy. Who was this woman, and what had happened to her? She heard the sound of a car approaching the main entrance. Her heart began to pound. Adrian had returned earlier than expected. She quickly left the circular room, locked the door, and ran down to the second floor. She had barely reached her room and put away the keys when she heard Adrian's voice in the foyer. "Lucy Eleanor," he called. "Where are you?" She took a deep breath to calm herself and stepped out of her room with what composure she could muster. "I'm here," she replied, descending the main staircase. "I didn't expect you so soon." Adrian looked at her with those penetrating grey eyes that seemed able to read her soul. "I finished my business earlier than planned," he said. "I needed to come back. I needed to see you." There was something different about him. A tension in his shoulders, a shadow in his gaze that hadn't been there before. He approached her and took her hand with a delicacy that surprised her. "Have you been well? Has Doris taken care of you?" "Yes," Lucy Eleanor lied. "I've been exploring the house. It's beautiful." Only the permitted areas? Adrian asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lucy Eleanor felt her stomach churn. He knew. Somehow he knew she had gone up to the 3rd floor. Of course, she replied, keeping her voice steady. Only the permitted areas. Adrian held her gaze for a moment that felt eternal. Then he nodded slowly. Good. Because tonight I want to show you something. Something that will help you understand why you are here. That night, after a silent dinner during which they barely exchanged words, Adrian guided her to his private study on the 1st floor. It was a room Lucy Eleanor had not seen before, hidden behind a door that seemed part of the wall's wooden paneling. The interior was austere, with an oak desk, shelves full of documents, and a safe in the corner. Sit down, he instructed Lucy Eleanor, pointing to a leather armchair in front of the fireplace. There are things you need to know before we go any further. Lucy Eleanor sat down, feeling her heart beat faster and faster. Adrian remained standing, looking at the fire crackling in the fireplace. I told you our families are connected, he began, but I didn't tell you how or why. The truth is complicated and painful. But if we are to have any chance of breaking this cycle, you need to know it all. He paused as if gathering strength to continue. In 1867, during the Victorian reforms, a man named Julian Montgomery saved David Fitzgerald's life on the battlefield. David was a liberal soldier, Julian a conservative. They had no reason to help each other, but Julian did. And when David asked him how he could repay that debt, Julian told him there was only one way, that his daughter marry Julian's son. That's how it all began, Adrian continued. A blood pact sealed in the midst of war, and it was fulfilled. Hope Fitzgerald married Julian Montgomery Jr., but the marriage was disastrous. She tried to escape twice. The second time she disappeared forever. And since then a pattern was established. Every generation of Montgomerys must marry a Fitzgerald, not for love, not by choice, by obligation, to maintain balance, to pay a debt that never ends. And what happens if a generation refuses? Lucy Eleanor asked in a trembling voice. Adrian finally looked at her. Then everything collapses. The empire, the fortune, the family. Everything is tied to that pact. My grandfather knew it. That's why he stipulated in his will that I had to marry a Fitzgerald before I turned 35. I tried to avoid it. I looked for other options. I even tried to marry someone who wasn't part of the cycle. Valerie, Lucy Eleanor whispered. Adrian's eyes darkened. How do you know that name? It was in the contract, she replied quickly. It said I shouldn't mention her or investigate her. Valerie was different, Adrian said with a voice heavy with emotion. She was brilliant, independent, strong. I thought with her I could break the cycle. But she discovered the truth too soon. She found the room on the 3rd floor, she read the diaries, and when she tried to leave, something happened. What happened? Lucy Eleanor asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. She fell, Adrian said, closing his eyes. We were arguing on her room's balcony. She said it was all madness, that I was obsessed with a curse that didn't exist. And I tried to stop her when she tried to leave. I grabbed her arm and she stumbled. She fell down the stairs. It wasn't intentional, but she was severely injured. She spent months in the hospital. And when she finally woke up, she didn't want to see me again. She changed her name, moved to another country, and I was left alone, knowing I had ruined the only real chance at love I had ever had. Lucy Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes, not for Adrian but for Valerie, for all the women who had passed through that house, trapped in a cycle they hadn't chosen. Why me then? She asked. If Valerie didn't work out, if all the others left or disappeared, why believe I would be different? Adrian knelt in front of her and took her hands. Because when I saw you, I knew you were different. Not just because of the white streak, not just because you are a Fitzgerald, but because you have a strength that the others didn't have, a determination. Valerie wanted to flee when she discovered the truth. Your grandmother also fled. But you don't flee. You investigate. You ask questions. You challenge. And that's exactly what I need. Someone who isn't afraid of the truth, someone who can help me face it. The days following Adrian's confession were strange. He became more present, more attentive. They had breakfast together in the back garden, strolled through the mansion's corridors while he told her stories about his ancestors, and dined by candlelight in the formal dining room. But he never touched on the topic of the cycle again. It was as if he had opened a door only to close it again, leaving Lucy Eleanor with more questions than answers. One afternoon, while Adrian was on a business call in his study, Lucy Eleanor decided to return to her room to examine it more closely. She had lived there for almost 2 weeks and still felt the room held secrets. She started by checking the wardrobe, where she found dresses that clearly hadn't been bought for her. They were from different eras and styles, all perfectly preserved, as if someone had carefully kept them, waiting for them to be worn again someday. Then she moved to the dressing table. She had already checked the upper drawers, but the lower ones were stuck as if time and humidity had sealed them. She used a letter opener she found on the desk and finally managed to open them. The first drawer contained antique jewelry, pearl necklaces and gold earrings that sparkled even in the dim afternoon light. The second held black and white photographs of women she recognized from the third-floor portraits. But it was in the third drawer that she found something that made her blood run cold, an antique hand mirror with a silver frame. She picked it up to examine it better, and as she turned it, she noticed that the back seemed loose. She pressed it carefully and the panel slid open, revealing a secret compartment. Inside was a yellowed envelope and a small key tied with a black ribbon. She opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written in the trembling hand she recognized from the diary her grandmother kept at Jerome Manor. It was from Grace, but this letter was not addressed to her. It was addressed to the next one. To the one who comes after me, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means the cycle continues. It means another Montgomery has come for another Fitzgerald, and it means you have very little time to decide if you will be strong enough to break what I could not. I arrived at this house in 1952, filled with hope and fear in equal measure. Richard Montgomery promised me eternal love, swore that our marriage would be different. But from the first night I knew something was wrong. He didn't see me. He saw all those who had come before. He searched in me for his grandmother, his great-grandmother, all the Fitzgerald women who had passed through these walls. And when he didn't find them, he grew angry. He blamed me. He said I wasn't pure enough, strong enough, worthy enough. I discovered the third floor 3 months after arriving. I saw the portraits, read the diaries of those who came before, and I understood the terrible truth. We are not wives, we are repetitions. We are the Montgomerys' attempt to recreate something that was lost long ago, something that began with Hope and Julian, a love that should never have been, an obsession that transformed into a curse. He always returns, the letter continued. That's what I discovered. It's not just a family pact, it's something deeper, darker. The Montgomerys don't choose the Fitzgeralds out of obligation. They choose them because they are looking for something. They are looking for the strongest one, and when they find her, they try to break her, because only by breaking the chosen one can they free themselves. Or so they believe. I fled before they could break me. I returned to the manor and swore I would never come back. But the cycle is relentless. If it's not me, it will be another. If it's not in my generation, it will be in the next. That's why I'm writing this. That's why I'm leaving this key. Because the only way to break the cycle is to discover where it began. And that truth is hidden in the basement of this house, in the room that even the Montgomerys dare not open. The letter ended with a warning. Be careful with Mr. Thorne. He is not just the family lawyer. He is the guardian of the secret, the one who ensures the cycle continues, the one who chooses who will be next. If he is near you, it is because he believes you are the chosen one, the one who will finally complete what began over 150 years ago. Lucy Eleanor let the letter fall onto her lap, feeling the world spin around her. Mr. Thorne, the man who had been present at her wedding, who had made her sign the contract, who had looked at her with that inscrutable expression. He knew everything from the beginning. He had orchestrated everything. She took the key from the secret compartment and observed it in the light. It was small and old, with an intricate design that suggested it opened something important. The basement. Was there a basement in the house? In all her explorations, she had never seen a door that led to any lower level. That night, during dinner, Lucy Eleanor observed Adrian with new eyes. He ate in silence, lost in thought. He looked tired, as if carrying a weight that was slowly consuming him. "Adrian," she finally asked, "is there a basement in this house?" He looked up sharply with an expression of surprise. "Why do you ask that?" "Just curiosity," she lied. Doris mentioned something about underground storage areas. Adrian slowly put down his cutlery. There is a basement, he admitted, but it has been sealed since before I was born. My grandfather ordered it to be closed after something happened there. He never told me what. He just warned me never to try to open it. And you obeyed. I have always obeyed the rules of this house, Adrian replied with bitterness. Look where that has led me. After dinner, Adrian retired to his study as he usually did every night. Lucy Eleanor waited until she heard the sound of the door closing and then headed to the library. She needed to find some blueprint of the house, some indication of where the basement entrance might be. She spent hours poring over books on the history of the mansion, searching on the highest shelves and in the dustiest corners. Finally, in a volume titled Colonial Architecture of London, she found a blueprint of Montgomery House dated 1890, and there, clearly marked, was the basement. The entrance was in the kitchen, behind what the blueprint described as the main pantry. Lucy Eleanor headed to the kitchen with the key clutched in her hand. It was late, and Doris had already retired to her rooms in the service wing. The kitchen was dark, barely lit by the moonlight filtering through the high windows. She found the pantry and began to look for a hidden door. It took her several minutes, but she finally found it. Behind some shelves full of preserves was a wooden door painted the same color as the wall. She carefully moved the shelves and tried the key she had found in the mirror. It fit perfectly. The door opened, revealing a stone staircase that descended into darkness. Lucy Eleanor turned on her phone's flashlight and began to descend. The air grew colder and damper with each step. The walls were covered with saltpeter, and there was a smell of damp earth that reminded her of tombs. At the bottom of the stairs, she found herself in a narrow corridor with several doors on both sides. Most were open, revealing empty rooms that had probably been used for storage. But at the end of the corridor was a different door. It was metal, with a modern padlock that seemed to have been installed recently. Lucy Eleanor approached and examined the padlock. She had no key for that. But next to the door, nailed to the wall with a rusty nail, was an envelope. She took it and opened it. Inside was a photograph and a document. The photograph showed two identical young men, standing in front of the mansion. One smiled confidently at the camera, the other looked away with a distant expression. On the back of the photo, in hurried handwriting, it said, Adrian and Sebastian Montgomery, 1990. Lucy Eleanor felt her heart stop. Adrian had a twin brother. He had never mentioned it. She checked the document that accompanied the photograph. It was a birth certificate for Sebastian Alexander Montgomery Reyes, born on March 15, 1990, in London. But what took her breath away was the handwritten note in the margin. Declared deceased August 22, 2008, previous psychiatric internment. And below, in different handwriting, someone had written, but twin brothers share more than blood. They share a soul, and when one disappears, the other carries his burden. Lucy Eleanor heard footsteps upstairs. Someone had entered the kitchen. She quickly put the photograph and document in her pocket and climbed the stairs as silently as possible. When she reached the top and closed the pantry door, she found Adrian standing in the middle of the kitchen, looking at her with an expression that mixed surprise and something akin to pain. What were you doing down there? He asked in a tense voice. Lucy Eleanor decided not to lie. Looking for answers. Answers you won't give me. Adrian closed his eyes and sighed deeply. I knew we would eventually get to this. I knew you would discover things I would prefer to keep hidden. Who is Sebastian? Lucy Eleanor asked directly. Adrian's expression completely transformed. The pain in his eyes was so intense that she felt the urge to go to him and embrace him. My twin brother, he replied in a broken voice. We were born on the same day, grew up in the same house, shared everything, until the cycle claimed him. What do you mean? At 18, Sebastian began to change. He said he heard voices, that the portraits on the third floor spoke to him, that the Fitzgerald women called him from the past. Doctors said it was schizophrenia. They institutionalized him. And 3 years later, during a violent episode in the hospital, he severely injured himself. He didn't survive. But there's something the doctors didn't know, Adrian continued. Something only my grandfather told me before he passed. Montgomery twins are rare, very rare, and when they are born, only one can carry the burden of the cycle. The other must disappear. It's part of the balance. Sebastian tried to resist, and the cycle destroyed him. And you? Lucy Eleanor whispered. Do you also hear voices? Adrian looked at her with eyes full of unshed tears. Every day, he admitted. Every night I fall asleep listening to them, and every morning I wake up wondering if that will be the day I finally lose my sanity like my brother did. That's why I need to break the cycle, Lucy Eleanor, before it's too late. Before I become what he became. The revelation about Sebastian changed everything between Lucy Eleanor and Adrian. That night, after the confession in the kitchen, he didn't leave her alone. They sat together in the library until dawn, while he told her stories about his brother, how they were inseparable as children, how Sebastian was the more adventurous of the two, the one who always questioned family rules, and how, little by little, the obsession with the cycle had consumed him until he was unrecognizable. I tried to save him, Adrian said in a husky voice as he looked at the dying flames in the fireplace. I sought the best doctors, the best clinics, but nothing worked. And when he finally left, I swore I would find a way to end this. Not just for me, but for all who would come after. That's why you need me, Lucy Eleanor said, finally understanding. It's not just to fulfill your grandfather's will. It's because you believe that together we can break the cycle. Adrian looked at her with an intensity that made her tremble. You are different, Lucy Eleanor. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were different. The others were afraid. You have fury. And fury is exactly what we need to face what's coming. What's coming? She asked, though a part of her feared the answer. Mr. Thorne, Adrian replied. He is the final piece of the puzzle, the guardian of the secret, and he will soon come to claim what he believes belongs to him. The following days were tense. Lucy Eleanor and Adrian became allies instead of strangers, forced into a convenient marriage. Together they reviewed family archives, read old letters, studied the diaries of the women who had lived in the house before. And in every document they found the same signature at the end, Stephen Thorne as witness, as notary, as guardian of the truth. He has been present in every generation, Adrian said one afternoon as they reviewed documents in his study. My grandfather knew him when he was young. My great-grandfather too. It's as if he doesn't age, as if he is tied to the cycle as much as we are. Do you think it's possible, Lucy Eleanor asked, that a person can live so long? In this family, Adrian replied with bitterness, I have learned that anything is possible. The impossible is only what we haven't seen yet. A week after finding Sebastian's photograph, they received a call. It was Mr. Thorne. He informed them that he would visit the next day to review some legal documents related to the inheritance. His voice sounded kind, almost paternal, but Lucy Eleanor felt a chill upon hearing it. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake looking at the portrait of Madeline Montgomery née Fitzgerald, wondering what secrets that woman knew, what she had seen in her time in this house. And then, just as the clock struck 3 in the morning, something strange happened. The dressing table mirror began to fog up, as if someone had breathed on it. Lucy Eleanor slowly got out of bed and approached. On the fogged mirror, as if an invisible hand had written it, 3 words appeared. Trust no one. Lucy Eleanor's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. Who? She whispered to the mirror. Who are you? But the message slowly faded, leaving only her reflection trembling in the darkness. Mr. Thorne arrived exactly at 10 in the morning the next day. He wore the same impeccable suit as always, carried an antique leather briefcase, and his smile was courteous but didn't reach his eyes. Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery, he greeted, entering the foyer as if he owned the house. I hope the marriage is proving satisfactory. Lucy Eleanor and Adrian received him in the main living room. She noticed that Adrian was tense, his shoulders rigid and his jaw clenched. Let's go to my study, Adrian said in a controlled voice. There we can speak with more privacy. Once in the study, Mr. Thorne opened his briefcase and took out several documents. But before beginning with the legal matters, he leaned back in his chair and observed Lucy Eleanor with a disturbing intensity. Mrs. Montgomery, he said, have you been comfortable in this house? Have you explored its nooks and crannies? Have you discovered its secrets? I have discovered enough, Lucy Eleanor replied, keeping her voice firm. I have discovered that this family has a long history of deception and manipulation, and that you have been a part of it for generations. Mr. Thorne chuckled softly. You are more perceptive than I thought. That's good. Very good. It means you are ready for the full truth. We already know the truth, Adrian interrupted. We know about the pact. We know about the Fitzgerald women. We know everything. Do you really?" Mr. Thorne asked, raising an eyebrow. "Do you know why the pact must be fulfilled? Do you know what happens if it's not completed? Do you know its true purpose?" He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden. "The pact was not made out of a debt of honor," he said slowly. "That is just the story that is told. The truth is much older and much darker. Julian Montgomery did not save David Fitzgerald out of kindness. He saved him because he needed his blood. Because David was special. He had something the Montgomerys had lost generations ago, the ability to see beyond the veil." He turned to them with an expression Lucy Eleanor couldn't decipher. "The Fitzgeralds have a gift. They can perceive things others cannot. They can feel presences, hear voices from the past. That is why all the women of your family who have entered this house have been affected. The house recognizes them. It calls them. And the Montgomerys, with their obsession and inherited madness, need that gift to complete the cycle." "Complete what cycle?" Lucy Eleanor asked, feeling fear begin to replace rage. Mr. Thorne smiled. "The cycle of resurrection. Hope Fitzgerald never disappeared. Her spirit remained trapped in this house when she tried to escape. And since then, every Fitzgerald woman who enters here is an opportunity for her to return. Each one is a potential vessel. And when the right one finally arrives, the one strong enough to contain her, Hope will be reborn. And with her, she will bring the secret she took with her when she left." "What secret?" Adrian asked in a trembling voice. "The location of the Montgomerys' original fortune," Mr. Thorne replied. "A fortune that makes everything they have now seem insignificant. Hope hid it before she disappeared, as revenge for her captivity. And only she knows where it is. That is why I have dedicated my life to ensuring the cycle continues. That is why I have carefully chosen every Fitzgerald woman who enters this house, waiting to find the right one." "And you think it's me?" Lucy Eleanor said, in a barely audible voice. Mr. Thorne looked at her with a chilling smile. "I believe you, Mrs. Montgomery, are the chosen one. You have your grandmother's strength, Mercy's determination, the courage of all who came before. And more importantly, you have the most pronounced white streak I have seen in generations. That mark is not just genetic, it is spiritual. It is the sign that you can contain two souls in one body." "This is madness," Adrian said, standing up abruptly. "I will not allow you to use my wife for your delusions. It is not your decision, Mr. Thorne replied calmly. "The ritual already began the day she crossed the threshold of this house, the day she slept in Madeline's room, the day she read the diaries. Every action has been preparing her. And soon, very soon, hope will awaken in her." Lucy Eleanor felt the room spin around her. The voices, she thought, the ones Sebastian heard, the ones Adrian hears, they are not hallucinations. They are real. They are the echoes of all who came before, Mr. Thorne confirmed. All waiting for the chosen one to arrive so they can finally rest, or to take their place in the world of the living. "Get out of my house," Adrian ordered in a cold voice. "Now." Mr. Thorne calmly gathered his documents. "I will leave, but remember this. The ritual will be completed with or without your cooperation. The full moon is in 3 days. And when that night comes, the house will claim what belongs to it. The only thing you can decide is whether you will resist or accept the inevitable." When Mr. Thorne left, Lucy Eleanor and Adrian remained silent for several minutes. Finally she spoke. "Do you believe what he said?" Adrian looked at her with a tormented expression. "My brother believed. And look at him now. But I also know there are things in this house that cannot be explained rationally. The voices are real. The phenomena are real. And if Mr. Thorne is right, if there really is a ritual being completed, then we have very little time. Time for what? To decide if we are going to allow this to happen or if we are going to fight. And if we choose to fight, we need to understand exactly what we are fighting against." That night, Lucy Eleanor did not return to her room. She stayed with Adrian in his study, surrounded by old books and family documents, desperately searching for a way to break the cycle. And it was Adrian who finally found something, a diary hidden in a safe that his grandfather had left him with instructions to open it only in case of emergency. The diary was Julian Montgomery's, the first one, and in its pages, written in clear, decisive handwriting, was the complete truth. "I have committed an unforgivable sin," Julian wrote, "to fall in love with the wrong woman. Hope Fitzgerald was beautiful, intelligent, strong, but she was promised to another, and when I tried to claim her, she resisted. I locked her in this house thinking she would eventually yield, but she never did, and when she finally tried to escape, I pursued her. In the struggle, she fell, and although her body disappeared, her spirit remained trapped here in these walls waiting for revenge. Adrian looked up from the diary with eyes full of horror. All of this is because of unrequited love, an obsessed man who created a curse with his own madness. And that curse has haunted us for over 150 years, Lucy Eleanor completed. But if Julian created the cycle, there must be a way to end it. The next 2 days were a race against time. Lucy Eleanor and Adrian barely slept, spending every waking moment researching everything they could about rituals, exorcisms, and ways to break curses. They visited specialized occult libraries, consulted with historians who knew the colonial legends of London, and even spoke with an elderly priest who remembered stories about the Montgomery family. But it was Doris who finally gave them the most important clue. One afternoon, while serving them coffee in the library, she paused and looked at Lucy Eleanor with a strange expression. "Madam," she said in a trembling voice, "I need to tell you something. Something I promised never to reveal, but that I now know I must say." She sat in front of them, wringing her hands nervously. 40 years ago, when I started working in this house, I met someone, a woman who lived hidden in the basement. Mr. Richard, Adrian's grandfather, asked me to bring her food and water every day, but never to tell anyone about her existence. "Who was it?" Lucy Eleanor asked, feeling her heart race. "She said her name was Hope," Doris replied. "She was very old, but her eyes were young, bright, as if she had lived 1,000 lives. She told me she had been trapped in this house for generations, jumping from body to body each time she died. Every Fitzgerald woman who entered was an opportunity to continue, but none had been strong enough to fully contain her, until she found one who almost succeeded. "Mercy," Adrian whispered. Doris nodded. Mercy was different, strong, determined. Hope managed to take control of her body for weeks, but Mercy fought, and in that struggle something broke. Hope was expelled again, but she was so weakened that Mr. Richard was able to physically contain her. He locked her in the basement, in a special room he had built specifically for that. And there she remained until finally the body she inhabited wore out, and her spirit was free again. "And where is she now?" Lucy Eleanor asked. "Everywhere," Doris replied in a barely audible voice. "Mr. Thorne once explained to me that a spirit so ancient and so obsessed becomes part of the house itself. That's why the mirrors fog up, why the doors open by themselves, why sometimes voices are heard. The house is Hope, and Hope is the house." "Then we can't destroy her without destroying the house," Adrian said, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "There's another way," Lucy Eleanor intervened, remembering something she had read in one of the old diaries. "The way to break a curse is not by destroying the cursed, but by healing the original wound. Hope is trapped because she never found peace, because her love was rejected, her freedom taken away, her life violently ended. If we could give her what she needs, perhaps she could finally rest." "And what does she need?" Adrian asked. "Forgiveness," Lucy Eleanor replied, "and recognition. For someone to finally admit the harm that was done to her. For someone from the Montgomery family to see her not as a possession or a means to obtain wealth, but as what she was, a woman who deserved to be loved freely or left in peace." Adrian looked at her with an expression that mixed admiration and fear. "Are you saying I should ask her for forgiveness, to the spirit of a woman who has been tormenting my family for over 150 years? I am saying that someone must break the cycle of violence and obsession, and that someone has to be a Montgomery, because they were the ones who started it." That night, as they prepared for what was to come, Lucy Eleanor realized that something had changed between her and Adrian. They were no longer two strangers united by a contract. They were allies, companions, and perhaps, just perhaps, something more. She saw it in the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't noticing, in how their hands accidentally brushed when they reviewed documents together, in the genuine concern in his voice when he asked if she was tired or scared. "Adrian," she said that night as they sat in the library, "if something goes wrong tomorrow, if the ritual doesn't work, or if Hope manages to take control, I need you to know something." He looked at her with those grey eyes that no longer seemed cold but intense and vulnerable. What? That this, what we have built in these weeks, is real. It is not part of the cycle or any family obligation. It is real, and it is worth fighting for. Adrian approached her slowly. He raised his hand and caressed her cheek with a tenderness that made her tremble. "I have spent my whole life fearing love," he whispered, "fearing that I would become like my great-grandfather, obsessed and destructive, fearing that I would hurt whoever I loved as Julian hurt Hope. But you have taught me that love is not obsession. It is choice, and I choose to fight for you. Not because a pact demands it, but because I cannot imagine my life without you." He leaned towards her, and their lips finally met in a kiss that was soft at first, then deeper, more urgent. A kiss that sealed a promise that went beyond any contract or ritual. When they finally separated, both had tears in their eyes. The night of the full moon arrived too quickly. Lucy, Eleanor, and Adrian had prepared everything according to the instructions they found in the ancient diaries. They covered all the mirrors in the house with black cloths to prevent Hope from using the reflections as portals. They lit white candles in a circle around the third-floor room, where all the portraits were. And in the center of the circle, they placed a portrait that Lucy Eleanor had found hidden in the basement. The only portrait of Hope Fitzgerald that existed, painted before her entry into Montgomery House. In it, she was a young, beautiful woman, with a genuine smile and eyes full of hope and life. Mr. Thorne arrived just before midnight. He didn't seem surprised by the preparations. In fact, he smiled. "I see you have decided to participate actively," he said, entering the circular room. "That is wise. Resisting would only make the process more painful." "We are not here to complete your ritual," Adrian said in a firm voice. "We are here to truly end it, to free Hope and break the cycle forever." Mr. Thorne's smile vanished. "You don't understand what you are doing. If you free Hope without giving her a vessel, her spirit will disperse and all the knowledge she possesses will be lost. The fortune, the secrets, everything." "Let it be lost," Lucy Eleanor replied. "No fortune is worth perpetuating this suffering." The clock began to strike 12 chimes of midnight. With each chime, the candles in the circle flickered as if an invisible breeze touched them. The portraits on the wall seemed to move, the painted women turning their heads to look towards the center of the room. And then, after the last chime, an absolute silence fell over the house. Lucy Eleanor felt a penetrating cold run through her body. Her ears began to hum, and she had the sensation that someone was watching her from very close. "Hope," she said in a clear voice, trying not to tremble. "I know you can hear me. I know you've been here all this time, waiting, but I didn't come to be your vessel. I came to offer you something different." She knelt in front of the portrait, with Adrian by her side. "I came to ask for your forgiveness on behalf of all the Montgomerys who harmed you. Julian had no right to imprison you. He had no right to try to possess you, and all who came after had no right to perpetuate that cycle of control and obsession." The room temperature dropped even further. Mr. Thorne took a step back, with an expression of absolute alarm. "You are making a mistake," he warned. "You don't know what you are dealing with." But Adrian continued where Lucy Eleanor had left off. "Hope Fitzgerald," he said in a trembling but firm voice, "in the name of my family, I free you. I free your spirit from this house, from this cycle, from all obligation to the Montgomerys. You deserve to rest. You deserve peace. And I promise that the story of what really happened will be told, not as the legend of a woman who disappeared, but as the truth of a woman who was a victim of an obsessive and violent love." The candles all went out at the same time, plunging the room into total darkness. Lucy Eleanor felt a presence in front of her, as real as if someone was standing inches from her face. Then she heard a voice. It was not threatening or terrifying. It was sad, deeply, unbearably sad. "Thank you," the voice whispered. "I have waited so long to hear those words." The lights came back on all at once, but now they shone with a warm glow instead of the unsettling flicker from before, and in the center of the room, barely visible as a flicker of light, was the shape of a woman. She had the face from the portrait, but she looked at peace. Complete. "The cycle ends tonight," the apparition said, looking directly at Lucy Eleanor. "Not because you have given me a vessel, but because you have given me something much more valuable. Recognition. And with that recognition, I can finally let go. But know this. The love you share is real. It is not part of any curse or repetition. It is yours. Protect it, because it is the only way to ensure that no other generation has to go through this. The figure began to fade, becoming more and more transparent. Lucy Eleanor felt tears roll down her cheeks, though she wasn't sure why she was crying. Mr. Thorne, in the corner, had fallen to his knees with an expression of absolute shock. "It can't be," he murmured again and again. "It can't end like this." But it did end like this. With Hope's last word, a warm wind swept through the house. The portraits on the third floor lost their unsettling quality and became what they really were: old paintings of women who had lived and suffered. The mirrors stopped fogging up. The doors stopped opening by themselves. And for the first time in over 150 years, Montgomery House fell silent, a true silence, not laden with invisible presences or echoes of the past. The days that followed Hope's liberation were both strange and beautiful. Lucy Eleanor and Adrian woke up the next morning in the circular room on the third floor, where they had fallen asleep in each other's arms after the ritual ended. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the portraits that now seemed simply that, portraits. There was no more weight in their gazes, no more sense of being watched. Mr. Thorne had disappeared during the night. He left only a brief note on his desk that read, "My purpose has ended. The fortune I sought for decades no longer matters." Perhaps Hope was right. Some riches are not worth the price they demand. Doris found the note and brought it to Lucy Eleanor with tears in her eyes. "I always knew something wasn't right with that man," she said, "but I never had the courage to speak. Thank you for breaking the spell that had us all trapped." Lucy Eleanor spent the next few days exploring the house with new eyes. Without Hope's presence, Montgomery House felt different, lighter. The rooms that once seemed burdened with melancholy were now simply beautiful spaces filled with history. She decided to open all the windows on the third floor, allowing fresh air to circulate for the first time in decades. One afternoon, while reviewing the portraits with the intention of cataloguing them properly, she found something hidden behind Mercy Fitzgerald's frame. It was an envelope sealed with red wax. She opened it carefully and found a letter written in the elegant handwriting she recognized from the diary. "To the one who finally breaks the cycle," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means you succeeded, that you found the strength I did not have, that you loved enough to free us all. I want you to know something I discovered just before I left. The white streak in our hair is not a mark of a curse. It is a mark of resistance. Every Fitzgerald woman who has worn it has been a fighter, a survivor, and you are the strongest of all. There is something else you should know. The secret Hope kept was not the location of a material fortune. It was something much more valuable. The truth that real love cannot be forced or possessed, that freedom is more important than any wealth, and that sometimes the greatest strength is in letting go rather than holding on. That is the true inheritance she left us, and now it is yours to pass on to those who come after. With love and admiration, Mercy Fitzgerald." Lucy Eleanor read the letter 3 times, feeling each word resonate deep within her being. She went down to the study where Adrian was reviewing legal documents related to the inheritance. When he looked up and saw her with tears in her eyes, he immediately dropped everything and went to embrace her. "What's wrong?" he asked with concern. She showed him the letter. Adrian read it in silence, and when he finished, his eyes were also moist. "They were all right," he said in an emotional voice. "The true wealth was not gold or property. It was the lesson, and we finally learned it." That night, Lucy Eleanor and Adrian made a decision. They would turn Montgomery House into a museum dedicated to telling the true story of the Fitzgerald women, not as passive victims of a curse, but as fighters who resisted oppression and obsession for generations. Each portrait would have a plaque explaining who that woman was, not just as a Montgomery wife, but as a person with her own dreams and strengths. But before that, there was something Lucy Eleanor needed to do. She needed to return to Jerome Manor and talk to her grandmother. She needed to close that circle too. 3 days later, they arrived in Yorkshire. Grace was sitting in her rocking chair in the courtyard, exactly where Lucy Eleanor had left her weeks ago. But something had changed in her. She seemed lighter, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "I'm sorry, grandmother," Lucy Eleanor said, kneeling in front of her. "I'm sorry you didn't tell me the truth, but I understand why you couldn't." Grace took her granddaughter's face in her wrinkled hands. "I knew," she whispered. "The night Hope was freed, I felt it. After so many years, I could finally sleep without dreaming of that house, without feeling called back. You did what I couldn't, my dear. You truly broke the cycle. I didn't do it alone, Lucy Eleanor replied, looking at Adrian, who waited respectfully to the side. We did it together, and that was the difference. None of you had a partner who truly loved you and saw you as equals. I do. Grace looked at Adrian with an expression that mixed curiosity and caution. You are different, she told him. You don't have the look of the other Montgomerys, the look of obsession. Because I learned what they never could, Adrian replied. That true love is given freely, or it is not love at all. They spent 3 days at the manor helping Grace with repairs that had been postponed for years. Adrian insisted on hiring workers to fix the roof, paint the walls, restore the gardens. Not as payment of a debt, he explained, but as a gesture of gratitude, because without the Fitzgerald women and their resistance, the Montgomery men would never have learned the lesson they needed to learn. The last night before returning to London, Lucy Eleanor and her grandmother sat under the stars in the same courtyard where so many important conversations had taken place. What will you do now? Grace asked. We will live, Lucy Eleanor replied simply. Adrian and I will build a life that is ours, not determined by pacts or curses. We will have children if fate allows, and we will teach them the truth about our history, not to scare them, but to empower them. So they know that there is always a way to break cycles of pain if you have the courage to face them. And the house, Montgomery House, we will turn it into something beautiful, a place of memory and healing, and perhaps, just perhaps, we will help other families who are trapped in their own cycles of pain find a way out. 6 months later, Montgomery House opened its doors to the public as the Museum of Resilient Women. The inauguration was an intimate event, with historians, academics, and descendants of other colonial families who had had similar stories of oppression and resistance. Lucy Eleanor gave a speech in front of Hope's portrait, which now occupied the place of honor at the main entrance. This house was built on obsession and control, she said in a clear, firm voice, but today it stands as a testament to resistance and liberation. Every woman whose story we tell here faced impossible circumstances, and although not all could escape, all resisted in their own way. Their legacy is not one of victimization, but of strength, and it is our duty to ensure that their stories are told in full, without romanticizing pain or glorifying those who oppressed them. Adrian was by her side, proud and emotional. Together they had created something that honored the past while building a different future. And in the front row, with tears rolling down her cheeks, was Grace. She had traveled from Yorkshire specifically for this moment, to see with her own eyes how the place of her captivity had transformed into a space of healing. But the biggest surprise of the night came at the end of the event. An elegant woman of about 50 approached Lucy Eleanor with a nervous expression. "Excuse me," she said in a soft voice. "My name is Valerie Sterling, and I believe you are married to someone I knew years ago." Lucy Eleanor felt her heart stop. Adrian, who was nearby, approached slowly. "Valerie," he whispered with a mixture of surprise and something akin to fear. Valerie looked at him with a sad smile. "I came because I read about the museum in the newspaper, and because I needed to close my own circle. I spent years blaming you for what happened, Adrian. But the truth is we were both victims of something bigger than ourselves. And after reading about what you did, about how you finally broke the cycle, I felt I could finally forgive. And I hoped you could forgive me for running away instead of staying to fight." Adrian had tears in his eyes. "There is nothing to forgive. You were right to leave. I was obsessed, just like all the Montgomerys before me. And if you had stayed, I probably would have destroyed you as Julian destroyed Hope." Valerie looked at Lucy Eleanor with curiosity. "And you? Aren't you afraid of suffering the same fate?" Lucy Eleanor took Adrian's hand firmly. "No, because what he and I have is different. It's not obsession disguised as love, it's companionship, respect, a daily choice to be together. Not because a contract or a curse compels us, but because we genuinely want to build a life together." Valerie smiled with genuine warmth. "Then you have found what I could not find with him. I'm glad. For both of you." Before leaving, Valerie stopped in front of Hope's portrait. "Thank you," she whispered, "for freeing us all." That night, when everyone had left and the house was silent, Lucy Eleanor and Adrian sat in the library, the place where so many truths had been discovered. "Do you think it's truly over?" Adrian asked. "The cycle?" Lucy Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder. "I believe cycles don't end magically. We must choose to break them every day. Every time you choose to see me as your equal instead of a possession. Every time I choose to trust instead of flee. Every time we decide to build together instead of allowing the past to define us. That is true freedom. Months later, Lucy Eleanor discovered she was expecting a baby. The news filled them with joy, but also with a profound understanding of the responsibility they had. One night, as Adrian placed his hand on Lucy Eleanor's barely visible belly, he made a promise. "This child," he said in an emotional voice, "will grow up knowing they are loved unconditionally. They will never be a pawn in a power game or the fulfillment of a prophecy. They will be free to choose their own path. And we will teach them that true legacy is not material wealth, but the ability to love without trying to possess." And so, in Montgomery House, which had witnessed so much pain and obsession, something new finally blossomed. Not the repetition of an ancient cycle, but the beginning of a different story. A story where love was a choice, not destiny. Where strength was measured by the ability to let go, not to hold on. And where women with white streaks in their hair were seen not as marked by a curse, but as bearers of an ancestral wisdom. The wisdom that true freedom begins when we refuse to repeat the mistakes of the past.